All right, the number one starts with a really super flat as you can chiseled brush. The purpose of that is to get this initial point in this flick right there, a curved stroke to start you off and a flick and get it sharp again, real flat as you can to do this vertical stroke starting from the top to get right in there. Try to make that point as sharp as possible. Come straight down your axis all the way close to the base. Then go ahead and flatten out your brush to make the thick stroke. You don't have to worry too much about going to the bottom. Remember, there'll be a serif at the bottom. Round those off. Numbers are same as letters in as regard to just drawing them as like you were printing with like you were writing them with a pencil. Think in terms of that, and it breaks it down a lot easier if you can think that way. And then number two is really when you can think that way. Just try to write the number two just like you would with a pen or a pencil. And it really creates a framework for you. So we start the number two about where that guideline is I put that in for the numbers as well, because it's a good reference point for like 2, 3, 5, etc. Some of the, you'll see in some of the areas will use that secondary guideline. Then you just write it to as graceful as you can, coming around and down and meeting your lower axis point on the baseline. And this is a time also to clean that up, make it where the thick stroke will be is a place you can clean it up and make it more graceful if you need to. And this is just obviously a horizontal line at the bottom. You could do that serif first to have an A to B point, or you could just bring it to the sight line, lined up with your the edge of the two above the curved line. Go ahead and round off the end, pulling out and in from your thin line. Flatten out your brush. Now it's time to make your thick strokes. Once you're satisfied with how the radius looks. Starting with the top, right in the middle of the thin line, you'll come down, spin counterclockwise to taper into a smooth transition into the thin line. The base, flatten it out, vertical brush, just pull straight across. Finish off the serif with a round, starting inside the serif and just drawing a radius straight into the thick stroke. Number 3 starts out the same way as number 2 from that secondary line. You're going to come around. This time you're going to come around a little above halfway to the middle to complete that radius. With a vertical brush, chiseled flat. Bring it around just like you did the 2, only you're going to come around inside of that, a little inside of that axis line to meet a little past halfway. A lower radius, same, flat, chiseled brush, horizontal. Pulling clockwise around to the bottom, stop at the bottom. Very difficult to complete that stroke all the way. Cheers if you can. And come back up about a third of the way. Bring it around. Spinning just slightly counterclockwise to make that transition smooth. Finish off the ends, coming out and in, fill in. The bottom, push up, out, in, and taper in. This is a time to tune up those that right side if you feel like there's any areas that need to be straightened out and more graceful radius. Otherwise, flatten your brush at the top, just like the two. Horizontal, starting in thin, push down the brush, and then start to let up as you get down closer to the point. Same with the bottom radius. Start inside that midpoint. Transition down, pushing down. No spinning of the brush here, because it's a vertical stroke. Number 4, outline it just like you would with a pencil or a ballpoint pen. And it's best to, I've found by experience, to stay a little inside of that right side letter width, because otherwise the 4 looks too wide. You can try it and test it and see. Come down below the halfway point with a thin stroke in the direction of the stroke. Come off that top point along the axis all the way down to the base. Again, vertical brush. This is the most accurate. You could do a bunch of 4s in a row and they're going to look almost identical. You do it this way, because it's such a clean way to reference your edges. Then try making your thick your first stroke. Now all you have to do is fill in inside that thick stroke. You can come back and fill in that white space, or you can do it at any time. Pull it straight down, flat, horizontal brush. You'll have a serif at the bottom, so you can stop short. A little clean up on that right edge. Flatten out your brush with a serif on the base. Flatten it again to create the rounds. Horizontal brush, no twisting. Starting with the number 5, we're going to go ahead and make that left side thin stroke along our axis and about halfway, at the halfway point. Then we're going to go ahead and establish our number width, but we're just tucking it a little inside of the actual letter width to create a topside balance, visual balance. You can go ahead and fill that thick stroke in at the top, horizontal, with a flat brush. Round it off, starting inside of the serif, the top, and just draw a radius straight on through. And you're going to make a nice, almost like an O, a little mini O down below, starting with the inside point, spinning the brush clockwise to make that radius, and staying along the right edge axis, stopping at the bottom. Reflatten your brush with vertical, about almost a third of the way up. Go ahead and tie that in. And this again is a good time to do any fine tuning of that right side if you need to. Finish it off with your basic ending there, the little nodule. And then flatten your brush, horizontal. Starting inside and drawing towards the right, down, flatten your brush, push down, pull up, in. There's no twisting of the brush there because it's a vertical stroke. Number 6 is unique in respect of the junction, that inside corner junction. I'll show you what I mean. Found this to be the best way to execute this number. Starting with the left side stroke, go ahead and just draw it in just like you would, thin line, like you're making an O or a 0. Go ahead and finish up the top side to bring it around. That gives you a visual reference to keep you inside of that 0 framework, just a little below that secondary line. Inside the thin, come out gracefully, back over and up, fill that in. Now this is where you want to go ahead and make that thick on the thick stroke on that left side, and you'll see why. Starting with a horizontal up, push down, start to pull up as you get down to the bottom, no twisting. So now you're going to come off of that thick stroke to make a nice graceful intersection there. You don't want it to be like almost straight across. You want it to be a real smooth transition out of that inside thick stroke. That's going to make this, that's the beauty of this number. So you start out low, come up, and I should have actually started coming out of that thick stroke sooner with a much more gap in that inside that intersection. Go ahead and thicken that right side. And you'll see now I'm going to tune up that inner oval, inner ellipse to make it look more uniform. Because the goal is to make that inside of that ellipse to be uniform. For the 7, we want to establish the 3 points: the upper left, upper right, and lower left. So you can go ahead and start with the serif just above the top baseline and almost to that secondary line. Then from the upper right corner, point your brush down towards the lower left corner axis line and go ahead and draw a straight line straight down to that point. Now you've locked your 7 in. It's the right italic and it's the right width. Fill in your upper thick stroke with a flat brush held vertical, straight across. Tuck in that corner. One more overlapping stroke to give it a nice little flare at the same time. Round that off, drawing a radius into that line. Now here's where pinstripers are going to be. We're going to benefit. We're going to make a teardrop starting in the inside. We're going to go over. We're going to start in the inside thin and start to gradually graduate out, away, and back in. Same with the other side. Coming down, inside the thin stroke, out, and back in to make a teardrop. Fill that in. And you can also tweak. You want that to be a little bulb down there. You want it to be a smooth transition all the way down from the top bar of the S all the way down to the bottom of the S. I'm sorry, of the 7. So I'm just smoothing that transition out now on both sides. The number 8 is basically an italicized snowman. And basically what you want to do is with a slightly retracted brush, just make 2 circles. Circles that are slightly, just a hair squished. But the first one obviously you want to be smaller. So you're going to come down above the halfway point, bring it back up, and you're going to keep it within the number width so that you can see the guidelines and that's still. Bring it on inside of that. Keep it inside of that. And then the lower one, starting at the junction of that, you're going to go ahead and make that just a hair outside of the letter width. access guidelines. And if you can just think of it as like you're just writing it, like as if you're going to write it on a piece of paper, it really helps. It kind of takes the pressure off a little bit, at least it does for me, to just make it a nice, them smooth circles. And this also, again, a good time to clean anything up. Do all your cleanup before you do the thick strokes. It's a lot easier to do it then. And obviously, there's nothing you can do with the thin points. You have to leave those alone. You got to keep those thin. That's the whole beauty and grace of this typeface. So once you feel comfortable with your radius, your circles, your two circles, you go ahead and flatten out your brush. And there's just a slight clockwise spin on this one. And on this one, on this side, none, just because it's italicized. So there's a slight slant to the number, and so you'll find you'll have to turn your brush on the left side. Same with the bottom stroke. Go ahead and push down, slight clockwise spin, and then fill in. Right side is the same thing. Flatten out your brush, tuck it right inside that intersection. Push down, pull up, and just transition right in that thin stroke. For the 9, same process as the 6, only backwards. We're going to go ahead and create that thin stroke on the right side of the letter, completing up and around that 1/3 ending point. Then go ahead and make that thick stroke, similar like we did with the 6. Flat brush, push down, 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 down. Now start to let up as you get close to the bottom and taper off into thin. Now this time we're going to start at the top, and we're going to come around the left side and meet up into the thick stroke. So go ahead and flatten out your brush. Start at the top. Make a nice radius like you're going to make an O. Come down below the halfway point and start to rotate your fingers counterclockwise. So okay, if you have to stop there, the most important thing is that transition up into that thick stroke. Still spinning counterclockwise. Bring it right on up into a smooth transition. Go ahead and finish the little nodule at the end of the stroke, pushing up, down, in, fill in, down, in, taper in, transition there, and then flatten your brush to create the final thick stroke on the left side. With a flat brush at the top, push down, start to let up as you get down to the bottom, and moving over into the thin stroke. The number 0 is pretty much an O. It might be a little thinner. That's because all the numbers are just a little bit thinner than the letters. Executed the same way with a semi-retracted brush. I'm going to go ahead and draw the left side, spinning counterclockwise to the bottom. Semi-retracted brush, transition into that stroke, the top, and make an equal radius or ellipse around the other side. This is time to tweak it again, just on the thick strokes. If you need to make it little tweaks here and there, it's time to do. Otherwise, go ahead and fill in your thicks, push down, As you start to get closer to the bottom, start to lift up on the brush and taper in. No twisting of the brush here. Flatten out your brush. Transition in from that thin stroke. Keep those nice and thin up there, top and bottom. Push down. Taper in. Exclamation mark begins with a vertical straight line following the italic axis. Nice and thin, starting at the top with a flattened brush, set vertical, coming up just short of the baseline. Now you're going to make a teardrop, just like you did with the 7, only upside down. You start from the top, flare out quickly, and then start to gradually draw in to the bottom of the point. Same with the right side. Start in the top, flare out to the right, and then start to gradually come in. This will give you a really nice, consistent, straight on the axis exclamation mark. And then make the dot for the exclamation mark below the baseline, same way you do with all these, and make it the same width as the thick portion of the exclamation mark. Then the question mark begins just like the number 3, only you're going to go this time about at the halfway mark, or just even a hair below the halfway mark. But if you stay just around the halfway mark, you'll be doing good. Come around with a contracted brush down to the midpoint, right at the midpoint between the number width in this case. Then a vertical line with a flat brush down just above the baseline along the axis. And now you're going to do the same thing. You're going to do a teardrop for this, starting from that point, flare out to the left, and then draw back in, making it thick on the bottom. Same with the right side, coming out, making it thick on the bottom, coming to a point. Little touch up, smooth it out. This will be a good time to do your dot. Same as the exclamation mark. Same width as the thick on the question mark. And it's a nice oval or ellipse. And then it's also a good time at this point to finish off the end of that question mark as well, at the way the brush is contracted. And then go ahead and flatten out your brush to make that thick. Again, it's a good time to tweak anything on that edge if you need to make it more smooth. Otherwise, a horizontal flat brush, tapering in from the thin stroke, coming down, push down, start to bring it up. No twisting of the brush. The $ begins with another thin vertical stroke along the axis. Flat brush, starting at the top. Follow your axis italic direction from top to baseline. And then the S is a lowercase s. So whatever you did with the lowercase s, you're going to do with this, only you're going to just place it above the halfway point for balance. It'll look much better if it's a little high on the line. So again, you're going to start out with a semi-contracted brush, and bringing it around to make your inside right side stroke, just like you did with the lowercase s, and in and off. And then it's a good time to go ahead and do the ends. This side pushing up and around and back in to the thin stroke. Make a nice taper. Also a good time to make any tweaks that need to be done as far as flow, and keeping in mind that the thick stroke is going to be on the left side. Go ahead and flatten your brush out, starting at the top. Go ahead and proceed to come off that thin, push down, spin into the lower thin stroke. For the period and comma, go ahead and just make a standard oval or ellipse, like a dot of an I. And for the comma, I go ahead and I make a complete like period, so it's nice and in the right shape. And then once I've gotten that, I go ahead and I flatten out my brush real flat to make that pointy flick off the right side of the comma. So I'm getting my brush real flat right now to make that a real sharp point. Coming off the right side, down, and off to the left, flick. For the ampersand, you're going to start out with the number width, but the lower portion of the ampersand is going to go out much wider beyond the width of the numbers. Keep in mind to be just inside of that to keep the visual balance right. And you're going to go about, well, you're going to go about just above the halfway point, a little beyond above the halfway point, and then make that a nice big radius there, way beyond the axis line on the left. Bring it around, a nice graceful swoop, but give yourself plenty of space between the inside point and where that point is, because you're going to bring in a thick stroke element to finish that end off. Keep in mind that you're an italicized element, and keep that thick stroke in mind on the left side. There will be no thick stroke on the inside lower right side. I tried it and it looks horrible. Just keep that thin. So let's go ahead and make this ampersand. Your best bet is a good clean outline to start out with a pencil, and then just follow that outline with a semi-contracted brush. Bring it right on around. I'm twisting the brush counterclockwise to come to that point. That's pretty much a little bit above midway. And then same thing, bringing it down around, staying inside, spinning it clockwise to end inside that right side axis. Finish off the end. Any cleanups that you need to do. Not too much on the thin strokes. You're pretty limited there. You can only clean up pretty much on the thick strokes. Get your brush in the palette again, but bring it to a semi-contracted position. Starting from the midpoint, you're going to come around, a nice sweeping, gentle radius. Won't be able to go all the way around, so you come back up at your point, bringing it in, following that radius, and transition. Now you're going to go ahead and flatten your brush to fill in your thicks. Push down, let up, right into that point. Flatten out your brush again, starting with that inside middle point, keeping that little point nice and thin. You tuck yourself in there, bring it down, push in hard, bring it up as you go, taper into that thin stroke. And there was no twisting of the brush. Now here's where you really want to flatten out your brush severely, and you're not going to be quite a 45-degree angle, just a slight angle. You're going to follow that point on the end, because you want that to be a nice sharp point. And what you're going to do is you're going to start here, feather in. Now you're going to push down hard right here, and then you're going to let up quick and flick. Go ahead and draw an accurate outline of your at symbol. It'll come out a lot better. And then go ahead and outline that just like you would any other number, letter, starting with the A. In this case, it's going to be a lowercase a with a contracted brush. And you're just going to go ahead and you're going to follow around just like you do with a lowercase a. Coming down and around and stopping. Come back from the top. Transition from that line. So it's a nice smooth transition back down to that semi-oval shape. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to make that right side of that A. Bring it down just like you would a lowercase a. Taper off to the right. Thicken the stroke. Same as follow that taper to the point. Now you're going to go ahead and palette out your brush and get it to a semi-contracted point to make the outer line. You want to follow, it looks better an oval than a big round at, because this oval seems to follow the alphabet a little more nicely. And then you're just going to come around to the bottom and back up and stop just about the third waypoint. Transition from that stroke, down, around, spinning clockwise to meet that lower A point. Now you're going to go ahead and flatten out your brush to make a thick stroke from starting from the top, push down, let up at the end, taper into that thin stroke. And same with the inside of the A. Push down, let up, spin a little counterclockwise. Done.